Once upon a time, the elves of the central lands were divided only into two groups: the pale-skinned Dro'Lotin, wise and gentle practitioners of the most pure forms of magic, and the crimson-fleshed Pyrians, who had long since mastered the ways of the eternal flame, a war-loving people who fought only for the pleasure of searing the flesh from their foes. The Dro'Lotin had formed great towers, the Elicar, each one housing a crystal sphere infused with all the power of the elven specialists. Chief amongst these towers was Dro'Lokar, the Tower of Shadow, where the necromancers and warlocks and shadow ascendi channeled their foul magic into their own Elicar crystal. It was said that the Orb of Dro'Lokar was the most powerful, that any invader would immediately be drowned in overbearing darkness. The Archmage of Dro'Lokar was known as Elicar Devourte, one of the most powerful Dro'Lotin to walk the plains of Teresia, and undoubtedly the most powerful dark magi in all of Erythania. Elicar was known to some as arrogant in believing he could truly control the shadow, but those who followed him saw him not as a fool, but as a paragon. In the eve of the 5th night of Mirial, shattered sun in the human tongue, the Pyrian elves had been fighting a long campaign, in which they had sacked many of the lesser Elicar, and taken their magics and destroyed them, finding them an abomination before the purity of fire. And they found themselves camped before the great tower Dro'Lokar, and Elicar looked down upon them, worry creasing the wrinkles of his face. In the center bit of the tower, the Dro'Lotin magi were siphoning bit by bit fragments of corrupted shadow, trying to take only enough for the coming battle. But Elicar knew that would never be enough, and he came down with a furious rail, thrust in such dark power that the orb cracked, filling the tower and all surrounding areas with a radiation of shadow. The Dro'Lotin within did not die, however. Their flesh charred not by flame, but by void. They looked up with now bloodshot eyes towards the Pyrians' marching war machine, and they smiled. No longer were they gentle Dro'Lotin, using simple magic when needed. They were become Dro'Lotin, dark elves, arbiters of the shadow, and they charged the battlefields with a fury unrivaled, easily shattering the ranks of the Pyrian war machine. The Pyrians were pushed back to the very shores of what is now known as the Crucible, and they moved to the sea, using the intents of their fire to cover their tails with fog, that none may follow, that their people may rebuild upon the distant shores of Pyria. Back in Erythania, however, in the Crucible, and in Teresia beyond, the Dro'Lotin sensed the foul befoulment of the Dro'Lotin, and they went north, to the dragon citadel Dark Tower, and they begged the Draconians to assist them in holding off their wayward brothers. The dragons at first refused, thinking the corruption of the Dro'Lotin a problem only of the elves. But as the Dro'Lotin were reporting moving closer and closer to their old lands, the Draconians decided to act. Flying around the dark army, they breathed pure light, trapping the Dro'Lotin within, where they would lay dormant for centuries.